Hi, this is Annie Grace. I am the author of This Naked Mind, and I'm answering readers' questions. And today I have a question from Susan. Susan asks, I have a question for you that maybe you can address as part of a reader's question sometime. Do you think that people in other countries where wine is such a cultural thing, i.e. Italy, Spain, France, etc., have the problems with alcohol that we do here in the U.S.? Another question, is it just recently that our society seems to revere the wine snobs, the wine clubs, the wine collectors, and if so, why is that? So first of all, I think it's really common and a very, very common myth. In fact, it's such a common myth that it's prevalent all over the internet if you sort of look it up, that when you are introduced to drinking from a young age, you have sips of wine at the dinner table or at lunch, and it's just very everywhere, then you drink very moderately and it isn't a problem. That is complete BS, basically. And so all sorts of studies, and we don't like to believe that, certainly, especially the people who are perpetrating that. And but all sorts of studies have just confirmed that that's not true. So I want to get into the science, but first I want to give a little bit of anecdotal experience from my time in Europe and from people who were on my team when I worked in a corporate world about their experiences. So I had one woman who worked for me who was French, and she read my book and she reported to me, she was like, wow, your book was so amazing and it was so liberating. And I definitely feel the pull to drink all the time. But because it's such a part of our economy, it is almost like there's just no way we can't actually drink. Like my parents, when I was little, we would sit around the table and they would pour me a small glass of wine with every single meal, pretty much, at least a sip or two. And I always didn't want it because I didn't think it tasted good. And they'd always laugh and they'd say, don't worry, you'll get the taste. It's just, just wait, you'll see how much you want it eventually. And then sure enough, fast forward, she's, 39 years old and she wants it, and she wants it every night, and she drinks a lot every night, and she's conflicted about her drinking. But because of how much it is part of her economy, is what she's told me, that there's just not even a question of could you be drinking less or could you be drinking more in moderation. I mean, it is somewhat it is so prevalent that it is really hidden. So I did some research on this, and what some experts say is that in certain cultures where it's so boozy that it's just very accepted, there's wine at lunch in Spain or Italy and France and these places, that it's almost hidden behind how outward it is. So the problems are really more easily hidden because everybody is doing it and everybody's kind of on the same page with it. So it's much less talked about, and it's much more stigmatized if you do decide that it isn't for you. It is really like breaking from the tribe in a much bigger and almost scarier way than it can be in the US. And I definitely hear this from people who have, read my book or engaged in my work in countries like Ireland. So a few statistics for you, and we'll focus on France a little bit because it is really where that reputation comes from, that, they just give the wine to their kids from an early age, and then it's not that big of a deal, and everybody learns how to enjoy it moderately, and drinking isn't really a problem. So the first statistic I want you to know about that is that, so the US population is about 27 million people. The French population is about 67 million people. In the US per year, it is estimated that 88,000 people die from alcohol, which, by the way, is 4 times as much as all illegal drugs combined. And so 88,000 for 326 million. In France, where the population is 67 million, 49,000 people die from alcohol. So the population is a fraction of the population, yet the number of deaths from alcohol is more than half of what the US is. So just to give you an idea, there is 134 deaths each day in France from alcohol. And in fact, 13% of the overall male mortality rate is from alcohol. That means of all deaths in France, 13% of them for men are directly related to alcohol. And alcohol counts for 40% of alcohol deaths and this is really scary, they're under the age of 65. So alcohol in France is responsible for 1 in 5 deaths for the ages of 35 to 64. So there is this if you look it up, like friend to drink in moderation, is it better to give it to your kids early? And there's a lot of anecdotal reports about that, but the black and white statistics of how much life alcohol is taking in France are pretty blaring. And the same is true for other things. You can actually look up what percentage of deaths are responsible per country, and all of the countries kind of mentioned that have this very glamorized, romanticized wine culture are more percentage of people are dying each year from alcohol than, the US. But the US is catching up very, very quickly. And I think this is what really leads to the second question, which is it just recently that the wine stops and the wine clubs and, you can order the case of wine every month comes to your door, and that's a very normal thing to do. Things like that become really mainstream when marketers and business owners realize that there's money in them. And so the marketing that's happening to women right now, and moms specifically in the United States and probably around the world, but I'm very familiar with in the United States, around wine is astronomical. The number of dollars that have been poured into it, the fact that all of these plaques that we put on our wall, like no good story ever at wine, no good story ever started with a salad, or it's not drinking alone if the kids are home, or all of these things we think are funny. I mean, a lot of those come from the very industries that are getting us to want to buy the wine. There's an initiative in the alcohol industry advertising space to actually target women and to target mothers. And there's brands like Mommy's Time Out and Mommy Juice that are very specifically targeting women. So with women, with people over the age of 45 and over the age of 65 specifically, like alcohol use is just skyrocketing and it's going crazy. And so we look around and we think, oh, well, this is just a trend. This is something that people are just doing. Like most often, most trends come from deep pockets of advertisers and marketers that are really smart in how they do it and how they infiltrate it into the society. It's not going to be the TV ad necessarily. It's going to be the post on Facebook that is just, very viral. And that keeps getting shared because it's cheeky and it's funny. And you think that, oh yeah, well, that will make me kind of feel better about my own drinking. And so that's a lot of what happens. So I think the third part of it, Susan, and I think this is a really cool thing that you're asking this question, is that when you become aware of this, you start to see it everywhere. Like, so for everybody watching this, I just challenge you, go through the next, week and start to just notice the commercials. Imagine, okay, remember I told you at the beginning that alcohol kills 4 times as many people per year in the US as all illegal drugs combined. So imagine every commercial you see, every billboard you see for alcohol, imagine if it was any illegal drug. Imagine if it was marijuana or cocaine and I know marijuana is not illegal everywhere. Imagine it was any illegal drug that was the same amount of advertising dollars were being poured into it, and your kids were seeing that, So I think that really, once you see this stuff, you can't unsee it. So sometimes we're like, wow, where did this all come from? How did this happen? But really, when we're in it, we're not aware of it. We're not seeing it. We're just laughing at the plaques on the wall, and we're skipping past the commercials, imagining that it couldn't necessarily affect us. But the truth is that it all does affect us. It deeply affects our subconscious. And yeah, globally, just so you know, there's another statistic I found in my research, but alcohol is responsible for 5.9% of deaths globally. In the US, it's just below 3%. Like I said, in France, for men, it's around 13%. For women, it's around 5%. And then in the US, interestingly, alcohol is the third leading cause of death. The first leading cause of death is poor diet and lack of activity. No surprise there. The second leading cause of death is tobacco, and the third is alcohol. So, and that is, of course, in preventable, things that we consume and, end up killing us, unfortunately. So anyway, I think it's such a great question, and it's so important to look at this from a global cultural perspective, because we're really all in this together, and we always have the feeling, well, it would be easier in that country, or they have it better, or this and that. And the truth is, we're just really all in this together. So anyway, thank you all so much for watching, and have a wonderful day.